My friends, welcome to Zmotion Technical Support. Today let's learn how to achieve motion control interrupt. Let's begin. As usual, see materials firstly. Here can be referred. And the right shows controller wiring. How to achieve, we should know what is it, right? Interrupt means when CPU is running program some certain abnormal things happened. And now CPU must pause the current task, then process this emergency. At last, it will return to the position where the original program was interrupted. In this interrupt process, there are three phases. First one, interrupt response. It should meet two requirements. Interrupt main switch is on, namely, interrupt is allowed, and interrupt request is sent. Second one, interrupt processes. It contains interrupt point and site protection and execute interrupt program execution. Third one, interrupt returns. When all interrupt programs are processed, return to the interrupt point of main program and resume the site. The main program continues to scan. Except three stages, there are three kinds of the interrupt. They are power failure interrupt, external interrupt, and timer interrupt. Please note main switch of interrupt must be turned on before using interrupt. Then it will not enter the interrupt when initialization is not done. And interrupt switch is in off state by default when controller powers on. In addition, these three are all valid in basic programming and PLC programming. Now, let's learn one by one. Power failure interrupt. For this type, there is only one interrupt, and it must be a global sub-function. And the controller has only one power failure interrupt. It is triggered and executed at the moment of power down. Namely, it is with extremely limited execution time. So only a few of commands can be written, then store them in VR. External interrupt. It can choose rising edge or falling edge to trigger. Also, it must be a global sub-function. Currently, only interrupt in 0 to 31 can be used, and only the firmware that supports PLC function can be used. Timer interrupt, be global sub. When reached set time, execute timer interrupt function. As for the number of timers, connect to controller and use max instruction to check. Okay, now it is time to learn how to achieve, namely, the instructions and the routine. Actually, open interrupt through BASIC is different from PLC. It can be seen from the comparison. These are the same. Program opening and ending instructions are different. In BASIC, use one command to switch on and off. In PLC, use two commands. Only one thing should be noticed. The number should be consistent with trigger 1. While using interrupt program occupies one task number independently. In task window when debugging, interrupt running state can be viewed. Let's see how to use power off interrupt in BASIC. As mentioned before, only one power down interrupt is supported. While programming, remember to switch one main interrupt and define interrupt subfunction. Below shows the example. For external interrupt, it is used only by the controller that is with PLC function, and several external interrupts can be used at the same time. Also, it must be global sub-process. There are two ways to trigger: rising edge and falling edge. They have corresponding instructions. Please see below example and pay attention the range. Same, switch on main interrupt, define interrupt subfunction. For timer interrupt, it supports opening multiple interrupts at the same time. The number is determined by the number of timers. It can be seen there are 3 commands related to timer. They are used to open timer and check timer status. Switch on the main interrupt, then set the time. When time is up, execute the interrupt. If loop is needed, open timer when in interrupt motion. Next, let's see how to using PLC. Use LBL instruction to define the interrupt function that is to be called. The right shows simple examples in the adder diagram. While using external interrupt, please note X number of input register is octal system, such as the trigger condition of external interrupt defined by this command is the rising edge of X10, which means input 10 is valid when using the simulator. In actual controller wiring, use in 8. And when interrupt program is running, one task is occupied, and the task node is allocated automatically. No need to set manually. Below shows the task status when running timer interrupt. Next, let's see what we should note when using interrupt. External interrupt is only valid in firmware that supports PLC function. In BASIC, all functions must be global subprocess, and there is no priority among these interruptions. Multiple interrupts can be executed at the same time, but too many interrupt functions is not recommended. As we know, there is only one task inside the controller that processes all interrupt signal responses, and it is a fixed interrupt task number. If interrupt handles too many functions, and the code of the interrupt handled is too long, it may cause blocking. The solutions are decrease the number of interrupts in a way, or call one independent task to handle the complex task in interrupt. Here, it shows a long interrupt program. Then this example's program will not be blocked, because one independent task is built in. It opens task 3 to process. Use delay command and wait command to simulate a large amount of codes. At last, routine is coming. The left is basic program of 3 interrupts. The right is PLC program. Firstly, let's see basic program. In main program, it contains 4 parts: access parameters, configuration, interrupt on, timer on, and while loop. Also, there are 4 parts for interrupt program: timer interrupt, external rising edge interrupt, external falling edge interrupt, and power off interrupt. Let's connect to simulator and start to debug. Download the program. Run the program. After executed this, switch on the timer interrupt, and it will be printed. Now, in the task window, it can be seen timer interrupt has completed. Okay, let's see external interrupt. Set rising edge signal to into to trigger the external rising edge interrupt. Interrupt program runs at line 36 at this time. Then, set a falling edge signal to into to trigger the external falling edge interrupt. Interrupt program runs at line 40 at this time. Next, let's run the processing program. Close the simulator to imitate controller power off. Connect again. Check VR register data. Select VR register. Read. It can be seen VR register stores the pulse coordinates. If you want timer interrupt to be executed periodically, please open timer in timer interrupt. Let's see the loop effect. Download the program again to run. Here, timer interrupt starts to executing in cycle. If we run a large number of codes in interrupt, how it is? Add autorun task now for basic 2. Download the program. Start to debug. And it can be watched the timer interrupt 0 blocks. It is blocked in line 11. So when timing or at timer 1 can't trigger timer interrupt 1 execution. In this situation, so many codes. It can open the task in the interrupt to run a great amount of codes. Create a new task to process codes of timer interrupt 0. Download the program again. After 1000 milliseconds, timer interrupt 0 is on. Run task 3. After 1100 milliseconds, timer interrupt 1 runs normally. Timer interrupt 0 blocks in line 17. In this way, even though timer interrupt 0 blocks, timer interrupt 1 can run. 2 interrupts both run normally. Next, PLC interrupt operation will be shown. Open PLC file. Interrupts program is written behind the main program. The same, connect to simulator and download the program. When power in on, M800 to conduct 1 period. Allow interrupt. X0 is used to open timer 0. X1 is used to open timer 1. X3 is used to prohibit the interrupt. At first, input X0. Timer 0 starts timing. After 2000 milliseconds, execute timer interrupt 0. At this time, there is the interrupt task in task window. Input X1. Timer 1 starts timing. After 3000 milliseconds, execute timer interrupt 1. When time is up, T1 is conducted, output Y1. These two lines are used for loop. Disconnect timer when Y1 is conducted. T1 commonly open contact loses the power, Y1 loses also, and Y1's contact that is commonly off is conducted again. Conduct timer T1. So only when X1 is in conduction, timer interrupt 1 executes in cycle. Set rising edge signal to into to trigger the external rising edge interrupt. Then, set falling edge signal to into to trigger the external falling edge interrupt. And it can execute at the same time in multiple interrupts. Input X3, all interrupts stop. Also, after power down, execute power off interrupt. PLC power is on. Where register initial data is 200. Close the simulator to assume controller power failure. Connect again. It can be seen VR value changed. Okay, today's knowledge is over. By the way, there is article description also. If you are interested in, please go to Zmotion website or contact us. Thank you and see you next time. Have a nice day.